In this Huberman Lab podcast, Dr. Andrew Huberman explores psilocybin, which is a psychedelic that modifies the psyche and can change our level of consciousness, perception of the outside world, memories, thoughts, feelings, etc. It activates a subset of serotonin receptors, leading to neuroplasticity at the level of the neural circuits that serve things like memory and perception. Psilocybin is converted to psilocin, the actual compound that goes into the brain to create all the changes in consciousness and rewiring effects. Understanding how psilocybin is converted to psilocin has tremendous impact on the duration of a psilocybin journey, whether it leads to a short or longer window for neuroplasticity. Many positive changes possible with proper psilocybin therapeutic approaches take place after the session. The conditions of a psilocybin journey, including whether it is done with eyes open or closed, or if people alternate between eyes open and closed phases, whether music is played and what types of music, dictate whether someone will feel better or worse in the days and weeks following that psilocybin journey. The dosage level is also a crucial part. Clinical studies show that even just one psilocybin journey can improve mood in a long-standing way. But most clinical trials involve two dosages, spaced in very precise ways from one another, with appropriate follow-up. Psilocybin is one of many psychedelics that include LSD, DMT, 5-MeO-DMT, and MDMA. But this episode focuses only on psilocybin. Psilocybin is a Schedule I drug in the United States, which is considered illegal except for rare instances such as clinical studies in a few decriminalized areas such as Oregon and Oakland, California. He emphasizes that it is vital to observe the law and that people should not possess or sell psilocybin illegally. He also discusses important safety issues related to psilocybin, including whether young people under 25 should consume it given the rampant period of neuroplasticity occurring naturally in their brains. Dr. Huberman also talks about dosages in relation to people who have formerly been on or may currently be on different forms of antidepressants and those at risk for psychotic episodes, including people with a propensity for psychosis or close family members. He encourages listeners to stay informed about psilocybin's effects and therapeutic applications to make informed decisions about whether or not it is right for them. Dr. Huberman also highlights that this podcast is separate from his teaching and research roles at Stanford. Dr. Huberman touches on tryptamine, which is chemically similar to serotonin. Serotonin is a neuromodulator that modifies or changes the activity of other neurons and neural circuits. Psilocybin closely resembles serotonin, and through binding to particular receptors, it can change the gene expression in particular cells, making those cells proliferate and interact with new elements of the brain and body. Even though psilocybin looks similar to serotonin, when consumed through magic mushrooms or synthetic forms, it leads to complex yet fairly circumscribed sets of experience such as visual and auditory hallucinations, changes in particular thought patterns, and neuroplasticity. The similarity between psilocybin and serotonin leads to an important question, which is why does psilocybin lead to these experiences even though it looks so much like serotonin? Psilocybin is a psychoactive compound found in certain mushrooms, and it is known for its ability to improve mood and relieve symptoms of depression and compulsive disorders in a manner that outperforms most standard treatments. Psilocybin has similarities to serotonin, but it mainly binds to and activates the serotonin 2A receptor. This receptor is expressed in specific areas of the brain and neurons that allow precise and specific changes in neural circuitry that leads to improvements in mood, relief from compulsive disorders, increased pleasure and joy from music, and enhanced creativity. The selectivity of psilocybin to bind to the serotonin 2A receptor is responsible for its effectiveness. This selectivity is different from standard antidepressant treatments like SSRIs, which selectively inhibit serotonin reuptake in the synapse, leading to increased serotonin levels that can bind to various receptors in the brain. The serotonin 2A receptor is located in multiple areas of the brain, and its binding leads to changes in neural coupling, neuroplasticity, and increased BDNF levels. All these changes lead to significant and unprecedented relief for major depression, outperforming standard therapy and other antidepressants in clinical trials. Therefore, proper dosing profiles and spacing of sessions are essential to optimize psilocybin's therapeutic effects. And understanding the serotonin 2A receptor's role in the brain is crucial to achieving this. The neocortex, which includes the prefrontal cortex responsible for understanding context and appropriate behavior, has a lot of serotonin 2 A receptors, which are also highly expressed in the visual cortex of the brain. Psilocybin triggers visual hallucinations due to its strong binding to these receptors, regardless of whether the eyes are open or closed. However, if one's goal is to derive long-lasting benefits from psilocybin, staying in an eye mask or having the eyes covered for most of the session is important. This allows the person to go inward and combine their thoughts and memories with changes in their emotions. Staying in an eye mask seems to be a critical feature of making the psilocybin journey therapeutically effective. However, psilocybin is not for everyone and should only be used in the proper clinical setting. People with a predisposition to psychotic or bipolar episodes should not use it. And studies with psilocybin generally involve adults aged 25 years or older. Dr. Huberman cautions his listeners about the potency of psilocybin, stating that it is a powerful drug that should be used with care. Dr. Huberman then delves into the dosing of psilocybin, explaining that the standard dosage ranges from 1 to 3 milligrams per day for microdosing, up to 25 to 30 milligrams per session for macro or heroic dosing. He clarifies that in clinical settings, synthetic psilocybin is often taken orally or injected intravenously to allow for tighter control of the dosage. Comparatively, street mushrooms are often discussed in terms of grams or ounces, with 10 milligrams of psilocybin found in 1 gram of mushrooms containing approximately 1% psilocybin. Dr. Huberman goes on to explain that the so-called heroic dose in traditional or classic psychonaut circles refers to ingesting approximately 5 grams or 50 milligrams of psilocybin in its mushroom form. Psilocybin is the active chemical ingredient in mushrooms, but its concentration varies depending on the strain of mushroom and how it has been stored. Laboratory studies have shown that psilocybin concentrations range from 0.5% to 2%. This means that those who take mushrooms must be cautious and acquire them from a reliable source to avoid taking a higher or lower dose than intended. In the future, when psilocybin is synthesized rather than derived from mushrooms, dosing will be more consistent. He notes that psilocybin has been used in clinical trials to treat depression and addictive disorders, and he outlines the components of a psilocybin journey that have shown to be safe and effective in those trials. These trials required people not to be on or abstain from antidepressants in the weeks before the psilocybin journey. The trip's experience largely depends on the person's mindset and the setting they are in. Hence, the terms set, mindset, and setting, environment, are coined to describe these conditions. The setting for a psilocybin journey must be conducive to safety and positivity, meaning that the person must be in a location where they cannot harm themselves or be harmed by others, and where there are one or more sober individuals present to ensure their safety. Dr. Andrew Huberman discusses the importance of setting when it comes to using psychedelics for therapeutic and other reasons. Huberman explains that some past negative experiences with psychedelics, such as people going blind from staring at the sun or causing harm while under the influence, have ultimately led to psychedelics being criminalized. Therefore, it is crucial to create a setting that is as safe as possible for individuals taking psychedelics. Huberman stresses that having responsible individuals present who are not under the influence is key to achieving this. Moreover, the setting itself should also include components such as the bias towards the person on the psychedelic being seated or lying down and using an eye mask to combine spontaneous visual hallucinations with different thought processes. This allows for maximum benefit of the psilocybin journey. Additionally, music plays a critical role in the overall cognitive and emotional experience during a psilocybin journey. According to Robin Cardart-Harris, a professor at the University of California, music is not just an incidental feature, but is vital to the setting and can be one of the major drivers of the experience. Furthermore, the type of music chosen is crucial, as the typical psilocybin journey lasts anywhere from 4 to 6 hours. The duration of the journey can depend on factors such as liver metabolism and the amount of food in one's gut. In clinical studies, it is advised not to eat for at least 4 hours before ingesting or injecting psilocybin, as this affects the acidity of the gut, which in turn affects the conversion of psilocybin to psilocin. The combination of all of these factors, including responsible individuals present, safe environment, seated posture, eye mask, and music, make for positive psilocybin journeys that lead to a better understanding of oneself and a more adaptive way of interacting with life. They explain that the anxiety component is part of what therapists refer to as ego dissolution. During this time, people wear an eye mask and listen to music that matches the contour of the psilocybin journey. The music changes depending on the stage of the experience. For the most intense part of the journey, which is the peak of emotion and perception, the music is often high in volume and contains a lot of percussion. People under the influence of psilocybin often report synesthesia, or the merging of different senses, such as perceiving colors and geometric shapes with music. They also note that their pattern of breathing becomes linked to what they are hearing, seeing, and feeling. The podcast explains that psilocybin mostly activates the serotonin 2A receptor, which can explain what is happening in the brain during a psychedelic journey. He describes the pyramidal neurons, which are present in many areas of the brain, and explains that they have dendrites that extend upwards into layers above them, allowing them to communicate with other neurons in their environment. The apical branches of these dendrites have a high concentration of serotonin 2A receptors, which are activated by psilocybin during a trip. Dr. Huberman explains that this activation causes an increase in lateral communication between brain areas and a reduction in the modular or segmented organization of brain function. Instead, there is an increase in the integration of communication across disparate brain regions. This results in an increase in sensory information flowing from the bottom up, with a corresponding shift in the flow of sensory information into the brain that can generally be described as a broader and including more blending of the different senses. Dr. Huberman also explains that these effects of psilocybin on the brain can partially explain the well-known phenomenon of synesthesia, where sensory experiences blend together, such as breathing being linked to a sound or a sound being linked to a visual experience. The serotonin 2A receptor activation allows for more broad, less precise, and less hierarchical activation of brain circuitry, which is responsible for the altered state of consciousness experienced during a psilocybin trip. Under the influence of psilocybin, the activation patterns in the brain become less channeled, less modular, and less hierarchical. This means that brain networks that are not normally as active at the same time become more extensively active when under the influence of psychedelics like psilocybin. There are different models about which brain networks are most activated during a psilocybin journey, such as changes in the default mode network, one of the systems thought to be rewired under conditions of psilocybin or other psychedelics. Nonetheless, all of these models are thought to be true and point towards more extensive communication between areas of the brain that normally are not as active at the same time when under the influence of psychedelics. Furthermore, psilocybin expands the functional connectivity of the brain not only during the session, but also after the effects have worn off. The effects of psilocybin and MDMA on between network resting state functional connectivity in healthy volunteers have been studied. Brain imaging has found that people who have taken psilocybin or MDMA have more extensive connectivity, which points to an enhanced lateral connectivity, less hierarchical organization, and more interconnection and communication between different brain areas. This study is important because it focuses on healthy volunteers and the resting state of their brain without providing a particular auditory or visual stimulus. Psilocybin leads to adaptive rewiring of the brain, which means rewiring that leads to new, interesting, and accessible ideas that allow people to function better in their lives. Several human studies using brain imaging techniques have evaluated how psilocybin changes connectivity in the brain, expanding it in ways that still allow people to function in their daily lives. The increase in connectivity seems to lead to positive or adaptive rewiring of neural tissue, which makes psilocybin exciting from a therapeutic standpoint. It has also been found that psilocybin does not lead to disruptions in memory, despite increasing connectivity, reducing modularity, and hierarchical organization of the brain. In fact, psilocybin has positive effects on creativity and our experiences of life outside of psychedelic journeys, but this has only been explored in a narrow set of dimensions. A study entitled Increased Low-Frequency Brain Responses to Music After Psilocybin Therapy for Depression found that people who listened to music during psilocybin therapy had increased low-frequency brain responses to music, activating different brain areas depending on the genre of music. Areas of the auditory cortex and reward circuitry, such as the ventral striatum and mesolimbic reward pathway, were activated during this process. Music is a great stimulus for studying the brain because it can be broken down into various frequencies. Psilocybin can affect an individual's emotional response to music in interesting ways. Major depression can result in reduced pleasure derived from different types of experiences, including music. However, a study found that psilocybin consumption within a particular set and setting can evoke elevated emotionality, leading to an increased positive perception of music and individual likes, and a reduction in the depressiveness or sadness caused by the music that tended to make them sad. Research indicates that psilocybin can rewire the connections between the emotion centers in the brain and the networks controlling auditory perception of music, resulting in the ability to experience joy in response to music again, as well as allowing individuals to listen to music that previously made them feel sad and depressed without becoming overwhelmed by these emotions. Neuroimaging data and subjective reports show that such changes are related to structural and functional rewiring in the brain. The PS connectivity between different brain regions can allow for new relationships between different sensory and emotional states, which can persist even after the psychedelic journey has finished. Many researchers suggest that this is one reason why psilocybin can rewire an individual's relationship to things more broadly. Dr. Huberman discusses the potential effects of psilocybin on depression, explaining that negative emotions and thoughts often arise from habitual patterns of thinking. Psilocybin has been shown to invoke new patterns of learning and considerations, leading to actual rewiring of the emotion centers in the brain. The journey itself serves as a wedge that initiates the neuroplasticity process, which people can direct to serve them in their daily lives. Dr. Huberman describes the key and stereotype experiences that people have during a psilocybin journey, such as letting go, ego dissolution, and feelings of connectedness. These experiences are subjective, but studies have explored their relationship to positive therapeutic outcomes. One such study, entitled Quality of Acute Psychedelic Experience Predicts Therapeutic Efficacy of Psilocybin for Treatment-Resistant Depression, found that the quality of the psychedelic experience correlated with therapeutic efficacy. The study utilized the Altered States of Consciousness questionnaire to measure the quality of experiences in subjects who underwent two different psilocybin sessions, with one at a low dose of 10 milligrams and the other at 25 milligrams, which is equivalent to about 2.5 grams of psilocybin mushrooms. One study found that oceanic boundlessness, an unusual and mystical feeling of connectedness with one's environment, is a key feature of a positive psychedelic experience. This feeling is not attached to any specific outcome in the moment and occurs during the peak of the experience. The intensity of this feeling is positively correlated with positive therapeutic outcomes, such as relief from major depression. During the peak, individuals may also experience ego dissolution, anxiety, and fear. The guide's role is to keep the individual safe, while encouraging them to let go and move through the experience. The paper looked at various subjective measures, such as experience of unity, spirituality, and insights, and found that these measures correlated with positive clinical outcomes. Individuals who reported a stronger experience of unity, spirituality, and insights were more likely to respond positively to psilocybin treatment, while those who reported less of these experiences were less likely to benefit. In a recent study on psilocybin, participants who took 25 milligrams of the substance experienced complex imagery and hallucinations, but simply experiencing these did not lead to positive clinical outcomes in terms of mood. The ego dissolution and letting go that occurs during a psilocybin journey is considered to be a key component in producing positive therapeutic outcomes, as it allows individuals to move through anxiety and fear of losing oneself. However, non-responders, those who did not have positive therapeutic outcomes despite taking psilocybin, tended to have higher levels of anxiety than responders. This suggests that extreme levels of anxiety may be inversely correlated with positive therapeutic outcomes, and highlights the importance of having well-trained guides who can adjust anxiety in real time using tools like breathing techniques. Dr. Matthew Johnson's laboratory has started to incorporate physiological size, a technique that reduces levels of autonomic arousal within psychedelic sessions as a means to quickly alleviate anxiety and stress. Dr. Andrew Huberman discusses how breathing techniques can be used to decrease stress and anxiety levels during psychedelic sessions. He explains that the breathing technique is a naturally occurring pattern of breathing that occurs during sleep and waking states, and when done deliberately can lead to rapid decreases in stress levels. Dr. Johnson's laboratory and at least one other laboratory are starting to use breathing techniques as a way for individuals under the influence of psilocybin to calm themselves down. This can be helpful for those who feel their anxiety levels are getting too high and could lead to a bad trip or panic attack. Dr. Huberman also discusses a study from the Carhart-Harris Laboratory about the subjective experience of ego dissolution or oceanic boundlessness during a psilocybin journey. The study suggests that the quality of the experience is critical to therapeutic success. He mentions a paper entitled Therapeutic Use of Psilocybin, Practical Considerations for Dosing and Administration, that describes the contour of a psilocybin session, dosage, contraindications, and the strength of evidence for the treatment of various disorders. Before discussing recent clinical trials related to psilocybin for treating depression and other conditions, Dr. Huberman talks about what is and isn't known about how psilocybin changes the brain. He notes that a psilocybin journey can invoke neuroplasticity and activate different brain networks. Psilocybin and the psychedelic experience can create abnormal patterns of thinking, perceiving, and emotional experiences. Researchers are interested in understanding the neuroplasticity effects of psilocybin because it can change the brain networks, behavior, thinking, and emotions. Neuroplasticity can take many forms, including the production of new neurons, which is referred to as neurogenesis. The production of new neurons in the hippocampus occurs following psilocybin use, but this is not the dominant mode of changing neural circuitry in adult humans. Instead, psilocybin induces neuroplasticity through the addition or strengthening of new neural connections or through the elimination or weakening of other neural connections. Studies exploring the mechanistic basis for psilocybin-induced neuroplasticity are largely focused on animal models because interventions can be done on knockout animals and imaging of the brain can be done in real time. The predominant theory is that psilocybin induces neuroplasticity through the growth of dendrites and the addition of dendritic spines to pyramidal neurons in areas such as the cortex, visual cortex, thalamus, and brainstem. These neuroplasticity events are structural and functional and can involve the growth of dendritic branches and dendritic spines, which result in the formation of new neural connections. Dendritic spines are little mushroom-shaped protrusions that grow out of dendritic branches of neurons and are the sites of new excitatory connections, new locations for input from other neurons to activate those neurons that have those little mushroom-shaped protrusions. This is seen in animals that ingest psilocybin or are injected with psilocybin. It has been observed that drugs that relieve depression or treatments, including behavioral treatments that provide some relief from depression, seem to be correlated with increases in spine growth in frontal cortex neurons. This raises the interesting idea that perhaps it's the growth of new connections, these new dendritic spines in particular neurons, that's created by administration of psilocybin that explains the relief from depression that people experience. Psilocybin induces both structural and functional plasticity in the human and animal brain, and does that in the human brain at therapeutic doses of anywhere from 10 to 25, perhaps even 30 milligrams per session for 1 or 2 sessions. One paper in particular, psilocybin induces rapid and persistent growth of dendritic spines in the frontal cortex in vivo, is one paper of a growing body of work showing that psilocybin induces both structural and functional plasticity in the human and animal brain. Dr. Andrew Huberman discusses the therapeutic use of psilocybin to treat disorders such as major depression and addictive disorders. He notes that the Controlled Substance Act of 1970 limited the exploration of the therapeutic potential of psychedelics until they received breakthrough status at the FDA in 2018. Huberman credits renowned researchers such as Robin Carhart-Harris and Matthew Johnson for their pioneering efforts in defining the clinical data surrounding psychedelics. He summarizes the clinical data obtained by these researchers, which indicate that a single or double dose of psilocybin can be used to treat depression. The dosages that were examined ranged from 0 mg placebo to 30 mg, with the 25-30 mg dose appearing to be the most effective in treating depression. Huberman references a single-dose study published in the New England Journal of Medicine in November 2022, which assigned subjects with treatment-resistant depression to receive a single dose of synthetic psilocybin in doses of 25 milligrams, 10 milligrams, or 1 milligram control. Results showed that subjects who received the 25 milligrams dose experienced a significant change in baseline levels of depression at week 3 following the psilocybin session, as compared to those who received the control dose of 1 milligram. However, there was no significant difference in the reduction of depression between 10 milligrams and 1 milligram. In a recent study, it has been found that 25 milligrams of psilocybin is more effective than 10 milligrams in treating treatment-resistant depression. However, there were also adverse events reported in all groups, and the number of adverse events was highest in the 25 milligram dose group, including severe side effects like suicidal ideation. Nonetheless, a single dose of 25 milligrams of psilocybin provided significant relief from treatment-resistant depression in most patients. The relief tended to change over time, but was stable or remarkably stable in the 25 milligram dose group, even 12 weeks after the single session. Many studies have explored the use of psilocybin treatment, and each study explored something different, including comparisons of psilocybin versus SSRIs or other antidepressants, and of psilocybin plus psychoanalysis or cognitive behavioral therapy versus cognitive behavioral therapy alone or psychoanalysis alone. The studies show that psilocybin is effective in treating depression, and patients report a good experience, minimal adverse events, and substantial positive relief from major depression in ways that other treatments, including antidepressant drugs, cognitive behavioral therapy, and other types of therapy alone, could not provide. Nonetheless, patients are encouraged not to avoid taking their antidepressant medications if their clinicians feel that it is important for their immediate and long-term survival. Psilocybin therapy has been found to have rapid and sustained antidepressant effects with effect sizes that are approximately 2.5 times greater than those found in psychotherapy and more than 4 times greater than those found in psychopharmacologic depression treatment studies. However, one should not take the fact that in these studies, people were asked not to take their antidepressant medication heading into the study as a sign that one should stop taking their antidepressant medication. Instead, these findings indicate that combining drug therapy with talk therapy, psychotherapy, is more effective than either intervention alone. Psilocybin therapy has the incredible role of creating an experience inside of the session, leading to neuroplastic events that can enhance connectivity in the brain, reduce modular networks, and increase activity in brain areas that normally wouldn't be communicating. Psilocybin therapy is able to exert these effects because of its highly mystical and subjective nature, despite not having a firm understanding of how it might exert its effects. Psilocybin therapy, when taken in the appropriate set and setting at the appropriate dosages, can invoke neuroplasticity and changes in emotionality and perceptual experience not just during the psychedelic session, but for long periods of time after the session. This provides remarkable relief from things like major depression and perhaps other psychiatric issues as well. Psilocybin therapy has the potential to help people for whom relief from mental health issues has been very hard to access. However, the use of psilocybin must be considered with all the safety precautions in mind, especially for people with a predisposition to or history of psychosis or bipolar disorder, or people who are not working with a dedicated and highly trained physician. Dr. Andrew Huberman discusses the use of psilocybin in science, stating that it is an exciting but still preliminary area. He explains that while psilocybin has potential benefits, it can also have negative effects. Dr. Huberman notes that there is a lot of excitement about this area of study and informs listeners that future episodes will revisit the use of not just psilocybin, but also other psychedelics, including LSD, DMT, 5-MeO-DMT, ketamine, MDMA, and mescaline. He emphasizes the importance of supporting the podcast by subscribing to their YouTube channel and leaving a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. He invites listeners to subscribe to the Huberman Lab Neural Network newsletter for free, which provides summaries of podcast episodes and protocols for improving sleep, focus, neuroplasticity, deliberate cold, or deliberate heat exposure, fitness, and flexibility. Dr. Huberman encourages listeners to follow him on social media at Huberman Lab on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn to stay updated on science and science-related tools.